Good, we're recording. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Tina. Nice to see you.
We're really excited to learn about Busy Bee Organics and, kind of your whole pathway into this industry, from the benefits to the challenges. And so let's just start off with Busy Bee Farms and where you're located and what you grow.
Okay. We're Busy Bees Organics is in Buellton. We're off the 246, and we are, predominantly a cannabis farm. We grow outdoor cannabis right out in an open field. It's actually kind of an amazing, beautiful way to grow sun-grown cannabis. We also have a lot of olive trees, and so they're hopefully going to be productive. We planted about, is it 600 olive trees, I think, was a birthday present from my husband when we first moved in. So those are starting to fruit now, and really excited to be doing some olive oil. And I have a pretty robust home vegetable garden that's almost a half acre. So we produce an enormous amount of food. And we're also using some of our ancillary acreage for some row crops now. Hopefully we'll be able to donate to the food bank, once we get into harvest. And we're actually going to take over a neighboring farm to do additional ingredients that are going to inform some of our branded efforts. So, but predominantly we are a legal cannabis farm, and we've also planted, I think, something like 4,000 trees around the perimeter for screening and to create sort of biodiversity on the farm. And we're going to do a bunch more pomegranates. And Nate's grandfather, that's awkward. Nate's grandfather, yeah, you got that out. Nate's grandfather gave us like close to 100 fig trees that he had propagated himself. He's, that's sort of Nate's lineage of agricultural background. So he's a Carp resident, and he propagated, there's about 10 different varieties of figs that we now have on the farm, and they're producing really beautifully this year. So you'll likely see a lot of fig jams and sauces and honeys and marmalades and marinades, some probably infused with THC for our home use. And that'll be something we do, but we're a cannabis brand first and foremost.
How did you get involved with cultivating cannabis?
Quite by accident. My involvement with cannabis was one of sort of lack of information and truthfully ignorance. But I was gravely ill. I was diagnosed with severe Crohn's in 2014. And at the time that had gone misdiagnosed for many, many years. And so I had really not treated it or really paid attention to it other than to suffer with it. So by the time I was diagnosed, I was in full-blown renal failure and almost died from complications from it. I had 8 22-inch ulcers in my lower intestines. I hadn't digested or processed food in over 2 years. I was anemic. I had neurological symptoms. I couldn't walk. I couldn't remain conscious. I couldn't even ingest water without debilitating pain. So, I let it go pretty far, not on purpose, but I had. And when I was released from the hospital, the instructions were pretty grim. I was put on what they call a biologic, which is intravenous medicine that's designed to turn your immune system off. So that comes with some pretty robust side effects. So that carries the risk of, I think they told me 1,000 times more likely to develop cancer. It puts you at grave risk for infection because it's turned off your immune system. So, and also it can cause liver damage. So what happened to me was I actually got tetanus, even though I'd been inoculated living on the farm, just doing normal things. I woke up one morning with lockjaw, and I was hospitalized. I went to Cottage Hospital. My father's a doctor. I talked to him on the phone, and he was like, get to a hospital, right the fuck now. And I never hear my dad say that. My dad's the kind of doctor that, if you broke your head open on a baseball field, he'd come with my mom's sewing kit and sew it back himself. You didn't go to the hospital for any reason ever. It didn't matter. I broke my arm once, and he made me sit through a whole symphony because we had tickets before he'd take me to get set. So when he told me I needed to get to the hospital in a hurry, I was scared. And what I was told in the hospital was, tetanus is a toxin that starts to surge through your body, and it causes paralysis, and first in your jaw, then in your hands, and then your diaphragm, and you suffocate. And it happens indeterminately quickly. So, I went to Cottage and I was like, I have tetanus, and they fought me for 19 hours because they'd never seen a case of tetanus because it's mostly been eradicated through vaccine. but because I was on this biologic, I obtained tetanus, and after 19 hours and a call to the CDC and a call to NIH and 13 different doctors telling me I was crazy, they're like, holy crap, you have tetanus. They gave me the antitoxin and then informed me that if they, they didn't know how well they had stopped the advance of the toxin, and that I had to stay overnight in case I stopped breathing, and that they'd have to have me on a respirator until I was able to clear the toxin, and that could take 6 to 9 months. And I had the first panic attack of my life. I mean, I have to tell you, I am so claustrophobic, and that really put it into perspective for me. And thank God the toxin was stopped before it got to my diaphragm, although I did have trouble breathing to full capacity for 9 months, as they said. I couldn't open my mouth. I walked like this for close to 9 months, and it took a very long time to be able to even have a functioning jaw. And, that was, I think, the last straw for me. Then I went back to my rheumatologist, and he told me, also your liver stopped functioning, so you can't be on this medicine anymore. And I remember asking him, well, so what solutions do you have for me now? And they said, Sarah, we have nothing to help you. And I asked him, that's it? And he said, yeah, that's it. Crohn's won't kill you, but we have no cure, and it's going to drastically diminish the quality of your life. And that was with that, like, I walked out of his office and sat down on the floor in the middle of Beverly Hills in a broad daylight and cried like a child. And I remember calling my husband, and he at the time had been encouraging me to try cannabis, and most importantly, high doses of CBD, which I wasn't familiar with. And I had been resisting for all the reasons that you hear everyone talk about. I wasn't a smoker. I didn't like the misunderstanding that I had, the vision of who cannabis users were. I was a very impassioned sort of entrepreneur, very, very high energy, high octane, highly caffeinated, quick moving through the universe person who never really wanted to have that version of my life slow down. And my understanding of cannabis, which was inaccurate, was that it was just for people who weren't necessarily operating at the same speed I wanted to operate at. So, but at that moment I was desperate. I always say to people, I'd have sucked a fart out of a dead chicken if somebody told me it would have helped. And so, kind of reluctantly, extremely reluctantly, I agreed to try it. And the other challenge I faced is I'm not a smoker, and I really am an anti-smoker. I feel I've always been an athlete. I didn't like the idea of putting smoke in my lungs, whether it be tobacco or anything. And so I wasn't even aware that there was other ways to enjoy or experience cannabis as therapy without smoking. I mean, that's how woefully ignorant I was. And, at that time, again, my husband sort of suggested, like, look, there's other ways you can do it. You can have tincture, you can have edibles, there's things that can help get this material into your body that don't involve smoking, and that involve less of the psychotropic effect that I was also very uncomfortable with. I'm not comfortable being that sort of faded. And so CBD with THC, ended up being a real benefit for me. So as I said, I was super, super, super desperate and willing to try anything. And, in the end, that was a blessing for me, because he went out and we got our cards. Thank God we lived in California at the time. We found a doctor who recognized the true medical condition that I was facing, and, gave me a prescription immediately. And we went and found, some very, very thick tincture. I guess it would have been it was pretty tar-like and strong, and yet it helped, it helped quite a lot. In fact, it was somewhat miraculous. It really took my pain away and really reduced my inflammation. But the problem was we couldn't find anything consistent. I'd have really good luck with something, and then, I actually got arsenic poisoning from tainted concentrate. Imagine I'm taking concentrate. So if somebody's putting a little Eagle 20 on their cannabis, back in the 2014 unregulated even medical market, and it gets concentrated down 1,000 times, I'm ingesting a lot of poison. I also got I got dosed with super high THC that was labeled as high CBD, because the testing was not reliable, if at all actual. And so both of those experiences were incredibly uncomfortable and terrifying. And so at that time, we had already started healing the soil at the farm. So still in 2014, we'd started growing all of our own food. to help control my condition. And that really helped, so we had pigs and cows and chickens and goats and, a huge vegetable garden. We had established a commitment to make sure everything we did at the farm was under strict organic practices. We were working hard to heal the soil that had been depleted from conventional farming for many years. And so that was certainly helping, but I really needed the strength of, the THC CBD cannabinoid combo to bring down my inflammation and manage my pain. And so, Nate had suggested, like, look, we're struggling to control your access to safe medicine, and we've already controlled your access to safe food. Doesn't it make sense, since we live in California, to grow our own medicine? And so we then researched everything we could to do it as legally as possible in 2014. And in 2015, we founded a collective in order to, meet whatever legal requirements were presented to us by the state of California and afforded us by the state of California. And that's when we started growing our own cannabis. So.
Wow. So you've been in the trenches from the very beginning here in Santa Barbara County. You've seen a lot.
Yes, ma'am.
What are some of the challenges that you've witnessed and endured, or continue to endure?
Yes, I mean, honestly, they seem to be escalating, not diminishing. I think in the beginning, the biggest challenge was, and I guess to this day still is, stigma. And, back then, I still had my branding business, although I wasn't really capable of working. I was too sick. And I had a name in the community. I'd, been a polo player at the club, and we knew people. And we knew that, the federal government was, I guess at that time it was still Obama, and the Cole memo was functioning, but we were very uncomfortable having anyone know that we were growing because of the risk of incarceration, of having our home taken away. I mean, we didn't know what could possibly happen, but the menu was a pretty big menu of really disastrous impacts if it became very public that we were growing cannabis, wasn't acceptable. So that was one risk that we faced, and we were very, very discreet about it in the beginning. And then because of that discretion, it was very hard to get good information about how to become good farmers of this specific plant. If you don't want to talk to anybody about what you're doing, other than your patient members and, your very, very close circle, it's hard to get good information. And your access to sort of what we now have access to in terms of being in an agricultural community, all of those great resources was really minimal. So that was challenging. Finding patient members and learning how to create medicine and understanding all of the different moving target rules that the state and the county were putting in place. And then having all the other people in our industry be equally cagey and uncomfortable being open and sharing information, which again was all about self-preservation. So there was a big learning curve that was sort of rooted in opacity, so it was very, very hard to get good information in the beginning. So thankfully, when Prop 64 passed, that began to make people a little bit more comfortable sharing information and being public. And as Santa Barbara worked through its ordinance, we became public in our participation in that process. And certainly some of the other local farmers were ahead of us in that regard, but we became colleagues with them and really were grateful for their presence and started attending all of the meetings and getting as smart as we could and providing input, even when they went through the PEIR, which is the Programmatic Environmental Impact Report. I remember attending meetings for what should that cover and what questions did we have as community members. So, the cannabis process has been an incredible experience in learning what our American democratic process is like, really playing out at the local level. And that I've really been grateful for participating in, because I realize there's very few people in the world that get to see it at such a granular level and how important participating is and how much that impacts all of our lives. And so we're still seeing that. I think it's disappointing to see some of the way the public has reacted, but we can certainly talk more about that. But that's been incredibly time consuming and challenging.
Are you surprised with how the public and some of your neighboring ag colleagues have reacted, particularly the wine industry? Had you anticipated that, or?
Well, I'll stop you there by saying my experience with conventional ag and the wine industry writ large has been exclusively positive. My experience with one or two willfully ignorant participants in those two industries has been negative. But I would not characterize the wine industry or conventional ag as anti-cannabis or anti-anything. I think they are, like any of us, legitimate industries trying to survive and do right by their industry and their industry members and being members of the community. So we have, to be honest, after the article came out about the CEQA lawsuit being filed against the county, I got the most immediate emails and texts of support from my friends in the wine industry than anybody else. I mean, that happened first. And, we have the same kind of camaraderie and I think collaboration with our agricultural neighbors. So I think to characterize this as cannabis versus wine or cannabis versus ag is just factually untrue. And it's disappointing to hear that that's how it's being perceived in the general public. But again, like we hear with all NIMBYs in any project that happens in any part of the state, it's always a noisy minority that seems to be carrying a louder voice. And I think that we're experiencing that here.
One of the interesting aspects of this new industry and kind of the anti-movement is that it's a very small group of people.
That's my observation, yes.
Yeah. Who have loud voices, but they're definitely not, they don't appear to be the majority of the voice of our community.
No, certainly if you look at the, if you look at polling, or more importantly at the issues the voters have weighed in on, if you look at the voting public, which is the base of our democratic process, we enjoy overwhelming majority support, both in our local voting public who wants to have cannabis grown here, as well as our statewide public who wants to have cannabis grown here and have access to safe legal cannabis. And even in our national debate, the polling shows that over 75% of Americans feel cannabis should be legal. So this is not, the antis do not carry the positions held by the majority of the Democratic vote, or, the democratic process or the voters in our, our world. Now, there may be people that disagree, but they are in the minority. And I think what's challenging is you have people in the noisy minority that are antis that carry a lot of influence and who are sophisticated in managing their voices. And they give the impression of being a larger group than they really are. And that's something I think that makes sense, if these are people that have comfort and means and time. And most of us, especially now, are struggling, to pay the rent, to find a new job, to be able to feed our children, and worrying about the plight of, is somebody trying to put my neighbor out of their cannabis farm down the road when I'm worried about making sure my children are educated and feeding them, just seems like such a low priority, and that's understandable. And I think it's especially disappointing that at a time like this, we're being forced into this debate when there's a lot more things that we could be spending our energy and our public resources on.
And speak a little bit about what it takes to grow cannabis. I know that it's an environmentally friendly crop, and give us a little snapshot of what it's like to be there on your farm.
Oh, sure. That makes me smile. I love that part of my job. Cannabis is a finicky plant. We say she because we grow feminized seeds. It's important for those of us who don't know, the flower, is a female expression, and she attracts pollen or pollinators, which we discourage because when a flower is pollinated, it produces seeds, and in the act of producing seeds, all the energy in the plant goes into producing the seeds rather than into the flower itself. And the flower is what holds kind of what we're farming, the cannabinoids, the THC, the CBD, all of the terpene and all of the things that we find to be this plant is producing seeds. A lot of that energy goes into producing seeds, and the seeds can be less helpful and productive in any kind of process. Nobody wants to smoke something with seeds in it. Seeds also can create problems in the extraction process. So we grow feminized plants. We grow from seed, which is unusual. We don't grow from clone. We grow right in the ground, just like row crops. So we're a row crop farm like anybody else. And a lot of times people are surprised to hear that we've been growing in the ground out in the open for many years, and no one's ever noticed we've been here. And that's the way we like it. It's just another plant growing in the ground, but it is something that enjoys this specific climate, equal to grapes. And it's always funny. And I think why the reason I have so many friends in the wine industry, especially growers, is we share such a lot in common in terms of the way that we approach our growing and what we're hoping to achieve and what our terroir does to coax the beautiful expression of the plant. So for example, in Santa Barbara, we have one of the largest temperature swings day to night, than anywhere on the planet. We are in Buellton, which, like all of Santa Barbara County, is sort of somewhat of a peninsula. So we get this prevailing wind from the ocean, that basically blows across. And in particular on our farm, we have a steady prevailing wind that happens about pretty much like clockwork, starting around 9 or 10 or 11 in the morning, goes to about 4 or 5 o'clock at night. And that creates cooling, it creates aeration, it prevents us from getting powdery mildew, which is something that both grapes and cannabis are susceptible to. The cannabis plants really like the cool temperatures at night, and the warm temperatures during the day. Our relative low humidity really prevents a lot of the issues that the cannabis plant is prone to. So a lot of powdery mildew, bud rot, or mold that happens, and some of the other pests that occur. We have a long growing season, which enables us to do 2 crops outdoors without any ancillary light. And we look for things just like, any farmer, whether you're growing tomatoes or corn or broccoli, if you're looking at heirloom varieties and a broad spectrum of expression of your chosen crop, you look for those beautiful nuances in the different genetics that you're cultivating. And we do the same thing here. So, when I talk to grape farmers, we immediately get into discussions about, the plight of whitefly and botrytis and, all of these things that we both experience, and we can geek out pretty hard. And then talking about like good sandy loam, which is such an important draining feature for our plants that are so sensitive that, cannabis plants don't want wet feet. And, my understanding, although limited, is that, grapes suffer from a lot of the same stuff. So we just have these perfect conditions here in Santa Barbara, which is, again, why so much wine is grown here, why so many strawberries are grown here, why agriculture is our #1 economic driver. And it makes sense because we have this unique climate that's really not replicated anywhere else in the world. And cannabis benefits from that as much as any of the other plants our fellow farmers are growing.
And so you've gone from marketing and fashion,
Yeah.
right? Although your husband has a long lineage in farming.
Yeah.
Into cannabis, health and wellness, and now you're preparing to launch a beauty line.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's beauty and wellness, but definitely my roots in beauty are deeply ingrained in that. They're the things that I'm passionate about.
Let's talk about well-funded.
Okay. What can I tell you?
I want to know everything about those botanicals.
Okay. Well, we're very excited. Yeah. So, along the way that we've been talking about, one of the things that I came to sort of know as I tinkered as a mad scientist in my kitchen and also relied on great information from other cannabis professionals and clients. We sell wholesale, so we have a lot of clients that are in manufacturing, and so I learned a lot from them. And one of the things that we learned is, extracts from these beautiful plants not only are the thing, like I use tinctures, and for me, for my therapies, because I don't smoke, I prefer ingestibles and topicals because I don't tolerate THC as well, and microdosing is really important to me. And I like to know that there's other ways that I can use this sort of wonder plant. So topicals were something that really was fascinating to me. So I started playing around with topicals. And, through research and personal experience, I discovered especially high CBD mixed with THC, it has this sort of great effect on the skin, so we really have not only pain killing attributes and anti-inflammation attributes, but, these great concentrates also can reduce redness. They can reduce irritation. They can really calm down and soothe sunburn or, eczema or any of these things, and I suffer from and so topicals have become an important part of my experience. And as someone who's also been an athlete, I played polo for many years, and you're always banged up and bruised. And a good topical goes a long way. You don't want to always be taking painkillers. So with that in mind, I really set out to create products that I would like to use and share with my friends. And so we're launching with kind of what I think are the most important kind of top 5 things. So first and foremost, tincture in 3 different ratios, for sublingual application, or you can throw it in your coffee if you wanted to, but I use it as sublingual. We're doing capsules to make, dosing easy, and we're trying to do no more than 5 milligrams of THC in a capsule, so that and then with also lowering various degrees of ratio CBD to THC, so that people can really control the amount of THC that they ingest based on their needs. One of the I saw on the market was for the types of products I'm talking about, the tinctures and the capsules that were available to folks, the THC was so high that I really couldn't participate in them. So there's some really great brands on the market, but for someone like me that really wants to gently step up my THC use according to my needs and my tolerance, it was hard to do that. So I wanted to put something in the market that allows people to dose in a way that's appropriate for their needs, and they can microdose, so they could take maybe a little bit more at night or a little bit less in the day. They can still function, and it's not a full-blown mind erasing couch lock, that we don't all have the time for. So we're doing that. And then we're also bringing in topicals. So as I said, topicals for me are a big deal, and things that I've seen on the market don't bear any resemblance to the beauty world that I came from in terms of the quality of the lotions and the body butters and the body balms. I see a lot of sort of wax-based home brews out there, would certainly have their place in the world, but we've got so much more technology available on the skincare side. So I wanted to bring that real high-end skincare perspective to this, but then include, THC and CBD. So that's what we've done. We've created the most luxurious, sumptuous body balm, and it is moisturizing and stays in your skin and has an incredible delivery mechanism. We're working with other natural botanicals that come from, the farm and indigenous areas. So we sort of made a commitment not to bring in any botanicals that weren't capable of being grown within, 100 miles of this place, and wherever possible grown on the farm. So our carrier oil, is safflower oil, which is a really, really limited, like water use required cover crop that grows almost anywhere in California. It has great anti-inflammation properties, and is both sort of edible as well as suitable for topical use. So that's our carrier oil. We're using neroli oil, for some of its benefits, and we'll be leaning into olive oil and avocado oil and other things. And our tinctures have natural pomegranate, extraction as their flavoring. So all of these things, again, are sort of indigenous to our part of the world and also have incredible benefits. So those are going into the bath and body oil and the body butter. And then we're going to do a really rich facial serum, which I think has made me look younger. So
wait for that. Speaking of waiting for that, when is Well Founded going to hit the dispensaries for purchasing?
Our hope is June. So COVID has, of course, slowed down production a little bit, and likely it'll be a rolling launch, but we have the tinctures and the tablet, or the tinctures and the capsules are ready. So we are hoping that we'll get them in market by the end of June, early July. That will be followed almost immediately by the bath and body oil and the body balm, and then the facial serum directly following that. So this summer, but towards the end of the summer, again, depending a little bit on the slow of COVID, we're so grateful to be able to be giving, our manufacturers business, especially at a time, when it's so hard and we're trying to keep people employed, but we're also struggling to get some of our manufactured goods and some of the ingredients we need, because everyone's business, of course, is so severely impacted.
Well, Sarah, I always like to end the show with projections from the professionals. Where do you think that we're going to be here in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years?
Do you mean in cannabis, or do you mean in Santa Barbara?
Well, take your pick. I mean, I think, Santa Barbara County is kind of the ground zero right now of cannabis, particularly in California. So I think kind of it's the perfect place to start. So where do you think?
I often call myself a relentless optimist, so I'm going to take a relentless optimist stance. And I think, partly based in fact and partly based in an unbridled willfulness to create this reality. But I think that we will emerge as a leader, and I think that it's going to create incredible economic and social benefit for Santa Barbara County, because I think we do have a legislative will. We do have a legislative body that has put forth a sensible ordinance to allow us to continue in the path that we've moved along. And if we can get the public support to give our elected officials permission to continue on the path they started, I think that that's going to be really beneficial. I think people have already normalized cannabis and feel that it's going to be something that's more benefit than anything else. And I think, look, it's here. It's not going away. There's just, the reality is the United States and the world has already accepted cannabis. We do have some vestiges of prohibitionists that are making a lot of noise right now, but I don't believe that they're going to be successful in derailing the business. I think we all have some homework to do to make sure that that doesn't happen. But I do think the future is bright. I think we are the only new industry Santa Barbara has allowed in, and if they continue to support us to operate legally, we're going to successfully push the black market out and bring jobs and economic prosperity through this agricultural and environmentally sound crop. I think it's going to do a lot of good for the community, and I really look forward to that day when it isn't so goddamn hard.
Yeah. Well, Sara, thank you for your persistence and your trailblazing. I mean, really, if it wasn't for people like you that bring cannabis in the light of legalization and stand firm, the black market would still be running rampant. So thank you for sharing your time and talents with us.
My pleasure, Tina. Thank you guys for all the work you guys are doing. I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate everything you guys do as well.
Well, we're going to have you back when Well Founded is fully launched and in dispensaries. I'm sure it's not going to stay on the shelf very long.
Well, I'd be delighted. That would be my honor. Very much so.
Okay, babes. Have a great weekend.
Cheers, honey. You too. Take care.
Bye. Bye-bye.